been confirmed. You will be joined in listen-only mode. The conference is being recorded. If you object, you may disconnect now.
Welcome. Thank you for standing by. All participants are in a listen-only mode. To ask a question during the question and answer session, please press star then 1 on your touch-tone phone. This conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect. And I'd like to turn the call over to your host, Ms. Catherine Gregg. Ma'am, you may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you could join us for today's technical assistance webinar. In case you are listening to this call and did not realize that this is also a webinar, please go to the Senior Corps Notice of Funding Opportunity page and scroll down to the list of technical assistance calls. And Thursday, October 4th, you'll find login information. Log in on your computers to participate in this call via webinar as well as conference call. I want to reiterate that today's call is exactly like Tuesday's technical assistance call. If you put in Tuesday's technical assistance call, you will find this subject matter very familiar. But if you did participate in Tuesday's call, we do encourage you to participate in this one as well, because there will also be a question and answer period at the end, and you will find that useful, as well as a review of the information that we'll be covering today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our fantastic presenters, Patty Stengel and Zach Ryan, starting with Patty.
Hello, everyone. As Catherine said, on Tuesday. So if you're going to enter an application into eGrants, you'll start ensuring you have all of the instructions available and in front of you. So if you go to the Senior Corps Notice of Funding website, scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll find the list of funds availability. You're familiar with all of the content here. You want the application instructions in front of you. And if you're very familiar with all of the content that's there, the RSVP work plan worksheets, the Word document where you can enter all of your work plans prior to actually entering them in the Performance Measure module. You can type in this particular sheet and save it to your computer, so you can continue to work on your work plans and then just paste them into eGrants when you're ready to put it. The eGrants visual instructions. This is primarily the content for today's session as it was for Tuesday's session. So if there's anything you miss, everything is included in these eGrants visual instructions. They're always here on the NOFA page for you as a resource. Note that in this webinar there is a chat feature, but we won't be using that for questions. We'll be questions until the end, where the operator can assist us with the Q&A. So I have all the documents I need in front of me. I have the grant application instructions, the RSVP work plan worksheets, the eGrants visual instructions, and the notice of funds availability. I'm going to go to eGrants. This is an eGrants test website, so some of it will not look quickly as it does in eGrants, but it's very close. So this is my home screen. I click New, and then I select the program area, so I select Senior Corps. And this is where I'll see a list of all of the NOFAs available in eGrants at this time. Now, these are test NOFAs. The ones we'll select are a little bit different. For competition, there are two options. There's RSVP 2013 Competition Appendix A Part 1 funding opportunity, RSVP 2013 competition, Appendix A Part 2 funding opportunity. You may which one you should select. So the NOFA page, Part 1, all funding opportunities. So it depends on which opportunity you're applying for, which NOFA you select. And Part 2, list. These contain R's in the opportunity number. So to start off, we're going to select an SCP NOFA just to show you. It next. And a screen would be similar to what you would see if you have an applications available for renewal. This might happen to a lot of our incumbent applicants. Use language at the top. It says you have applications available for continuation or renewal recompete under this NOFA. Please do not mean to continue or renew one of these existing grants before creating a new grant. And I know that I clicked the new button to start this NOFA. Remember, that was the first thing I clicked from the home page for eGrants. It look like I'm doing a new application, but if I click here, renew this grant, it creates a renewal rather than a new application. So I click renew this grant. And I want to click no. I want to apply for a new grant. I'm going to renew just to show you what might happen. One more time. Anyway. So what you do there is you would click new, and then you would select no, I want to apply for a new grant. And do a new application rather than a renewal. And the way you know that it's new is the type will say new. If it's a renewal, the type will say no, previous grant, / previous grantee. So now I'm going to do an actual RSVP application. RSVP, and I clicked next. And then my title is listed as new, so that's how I know that it's an application and not a renewal. And I can review the NOFA here at the top. It shows which one I selected, and as I mentioned, there are two opportunities, two options to select for the NOFA for this particular competition. Be sure selecting the one that corresponds to the opportunity that you're actually wanting to apply for. And this section, if you are a project, an applicant, you might see something that says create a new project. It would be an orange link similar to this. There would be no drop-downs at first. If you create a new project, it will have you actually enter a project title, project state, where your volunteers will be serving, your organization's street address, city and state, and zip code and phone. This one, I have a project with RSVP, so I am just asked to select the title of that project and the particular director that will be directing that RSVP. And then next. So the areas affected by the project. What exactly do you enter here? I'm going to go back to the page. I'm going to click Appendix A, Part 1, and apply for Alaska Opportunity Number 1. So I'm going to cut this. I'll hit Control-C. And then my application, I'm going to paste it by hitting Control-V. My opportunity number and state, Alaska Opportunity Number 1. And then, oops, sorry, I keep going to the wrong page. to that opportunity list, one geographic service area. So I exactly copy this. I'm going to these extra pieces because those don't belong there. But everything else, exactly as it corresponds to Appendix A Part 1, is what I'll have. So elect Opportunity 1 and all of the service area. Select my start and end dates for the grants for this competition. The start date and end is either April 1 or 1, and is shown in the Appendix A Part 1 and Part 2. So for purposes of this session, I'm going to select April 1, 2013, and my end date is 3 years later. So for an April 1 start, my end date is March 31st, 2018. If my grant starts on July 1, my end date would be June 30th, 2016. I see a section that asks me about State Executive Order 12372. I can find more information about that on page 8 of the application instructions. That doesn't apply to my particular grant, so I'm just going to say no. And then asks if I'm delinquent on any federal debt, and that is referring to my sponsor agency, and I select no there. Also, state application identifier number. You'll find from the application instructions, again on page 8, that is not used by senior core, so you can leave that section blank. Next. This is the page where I would enter all of my narrative information, exactly as it corresponds to the application instructions. So I click View, Edit Narrative, and I enter a lot of information there. I'd be sure I cover everything I need to, and I click Save and Close. You'll see here the box has changed to a green check mark, so I know that I've entered information into that section. I'm not entering actual text here, but you would. And I'll go through to be sure everything is covered. They're showing up as pop-up boxes. You'll want to be sure that your pop-up blocker is turned off in eGrant, so you might run into a few challenges. The last section is Other, and it's applied to this competition, so I enter NA. One, PNS amendment also doesn't apply, so I enter NA. To the bottom, and I see all of my arrows have turned into green check marks. So I know that I've entered information in all of those sections. Now I click Next. And this is where I enter work plans, so I'm going to turn it to Zach for that.
Okay, so to start doing your work plans, once you click on the work plan link on the left of your page, the link that says Here to Enter Work Plans will appear in the center. Click that link and it takes us to the Performance Measures section of eGrants. When the first time you enter the system, you click Begin. One thing to point out here, if you're looking for more screen space, there are screen instructions on the left side. If you click Lapse, make that go away, and then you can just click the box again to re-expand it if you'd like to see those instructions. And you can do that on each page. So you click Begin and it brings us to the Objectives tab. On this tab, you will select all the objectives that apply to your project. They are listed by focus area. You click a focus area, it will show you the list of objectives. Some only have one objective and other focus areas have multiple. In this case, I'm going to select Disaster Services and Environmental Stewardship. We had several about some of the measures not showing up in the system. Then I'm also going select the other community priorities other. The thing I have to do is select my primary focus area. This list is populated based on the choices that I just made. If I selected an objective in a particular focus area, that focus area then shows up as a choice in my list. You know, even though I selected other under other community priorities, it's showing up in the list. That's because it's not a focus area. It actually captures all of the activities that fall outside of focus areas. Capacity building is the same way. It would not show up in this list because those two are not focus areas, and they're not options for your primary focus area. Once I have selected all of my objectives and I selected my primary focus area, I can select Next to continue. So then we are brought to the Performance Measures tab, which we build work plans. So you'll have 3 category titles to choose from. I have my primary focus area, other key priorities, and other focus areas. If, for example, I only selected objectives in one focus area and other community priorities, I would only have 2 options. So we've seen some questions come in through the 2013 RSVP that says I'm not showing other focus areas, and it's because people who are asking that question have only selected one focus area. So I'm first going to select my primary focus area, then I choose the objective. All of these fields are required. So I type in my community need, select, and so I believe our call yesterday, one of the measures that was missing was D6. You can see here that it is available. Another question was whether or not there were instruments available to select for output D6, and you can see here that those instruments are showing up now as well. Enter the instrument description. And create an outcome. In this case, there are no outcomes associated with this measure. Step is select my service activities, and I select as many activities from this list as I would like. However, each activity I select will generate a separate work plan with the output and outcome that I have selected. So in this case, if I select 2, I'll end with 2 work plans that use measure output D6. It will also include the same community need. In this case, I'm only going to include 1. And then I click minimize this so we can see more of the scene. And click Add PM. You'll see it's a row at the top for the plan I've just created. You are required to select measures for each objective that you select. Yesterday, we were not showing all of the environmental stewardship measures, but you can see now that they are all appearing in the system as well. And then NPM. So I entered for my primary focus area and for the category title other focus areas for community priorities. You will enter all the community needs that you will address in the other community priorities work plan. Oftentimes, RSVP projects will end up with multiple activities. However, you can, in the community priorities area, but you can only include 1 community priorities work plan. Same output. So then I click Add PM. And give me an error message because I actually left the field blank. Select a service activity or an activity description. also about the character counts. All of these fields, even though they look like they're different sizes, the community need, the instrument description, the service activity description, same character limit count, which is 2,000 characters, and that includes punctuation and spaces. I appear to have all of my measures entered, so I'm going to click Next. Take me to this next screen. Now, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to run into a problem when I try to validate my performance measures, because any measures that have outcomes. Some way I can check this is to click Review Allocations, but we're going to wait and do that until I've entered the outcome targets and the number of volunteers. So the thing I do is I enter my project's total number of unduplicated volunteers, and I'll enter 100. And at the top of the screen will tell me how many volunteers I must place in each category. So it's telling me, I know that I have to have 25% in my primary focus area. It tells me I have to have 25 volunteers there. So I'm going to start allocating my volunteers to the different work plans. And some confusion about these two columns. We have the number of unduplicated volunteers, and the unduplicated volunteers are the way that we measure RSVP activity. And it means that for the purpose of unduplicated volunteers, you can count each volunteer in one work plan. This other column, total volunteers contributing. Since many RSVP volunteers actually do more than one thing, here's all of the volunteers that are participating in a particular activity. So they actually be greater than the number of unduplicated volunteers. Into your stations. You can say calculator as I've entered these numbers. All of my 100 volunteers. I don't place any more in my primary focus area. However, if I wanted to, I still could place 5 more in the community priorities work plan. Output targets. On this screen, as you mouse over the shorthand for the outputs, it will give you the full text, which just tells me I need the number of hours in disaster assistance. Parks. And for the priorities for the output target, since the output is going to report to us will either be yes or no, you met your target, you can enter a 1 there. Then click Review Allocations. And this is an error message because even though I satisfied all of the primary focus area and community priorities requirements, I don't have any measures that are out. So I haven't placed any volunteers in work plans that result in outcomes. So I need to go back, and this I'll have to go all the way back to the Objectives tab, because disaster services and environmental stewardship focus areas do not have outcomes available. So work plan. For healthy futures that has an outcome. Someone pointed out to us on the call that H9 says number of individuals with disabilities having increased social support. This actually includes both older individuals and everyone that's listed in the full text of Measure H9 as it appears in Appendix B. When the shorthand that was used, the shortened version used in eGrants, we had a little bit of a wording problem. So we realized that, and we're working on correcting that. So I had that performance measure. I'm going to have to now go back and allocate some volunteers. So I'm going to click Next to take me to the Targets tab. 100 volunteers, and I've already placed them all. So in this case, I'm going to have to change. So I click since I've over-allocated my volunteers. Rules, and it tells me that all the allocation rules have been satisfied. Now, next brings me to a summary screen. Review my volunteers, how I've allocated them by focus area, how by objective, by category title, and volunteers I have placed in work plans that result in outcomes. I can also print a PDF for all my measures, or I can print a PDF for one measure individually. And that people have noticed is I click on Print PDF. We're seeing the starting and ending date. Dates should be pulling over for your grants. They're not right now. It's nothing for you to be concerned about, but we're working that on our end. And the other thing that's not showing up here yet is the service activity description, instrument description, where it says how measured. The instrument description should appear there. Again, those things will be corrected very, very soon. So I go to this page, I review all of my information, make sure it says what I'm to, and validate performance measures. Tells me that all of my performance measures are valid, so I can exit the performance measures section and go back to the main application, and by clicking at the top where it says back to eGrants application. Turn it back over to Patty so she can walk us through the rest of the application.
The next section I'm going to move on to, just continuing down this row, I'm going to click on Documents. And here is a list of documents required for this application. As I said before, it is a test environment, so this list is a little different from what exactly you'll see in eGrants. If I go to the application instructions, which are found on the NOFA page, page 18, for required supplemental documents in eGrants. And here I see it says for competitive applications, all items marked as sent in eGrants should be sent to the address listed in the NOFO. If I were to go back to the NOFO, I would find an email address as well as a mailing address. And this particular section will show that all of the financial documents have to be mailed to the Field Financial Management Center, which is here to the address, and anything not designated as a financial document has to go to the email address that's listed in the notice. And here it clearly says the financial documents 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, and 15 for competitive applications and continuation applications to be sent to the FMC. So this only applies for competitive for me, and send my financial documents to the Field Financial Management Center. I see here a chart that shows everything that's possible to be sent as far as supplemental documents. Columns, new/previous CNCS grantee, and or not I need to send that particular item. So you'll see here new is for new applicants who have never had a CNCS grant. New, the second column is for previous CNCS grantees. So it might be incumbent RSVP, it might be a current RSVP grantee who is applying for a neighboring service area. It might also be a current FGP or SCP grantee who's applying for an RSVP grant. If you have a CNCS grant, you would fit the second column. See here, it clearly shows yes, no, or I only submit that particular document if it's changed, and numbered so you can see. You look at the top which ones are the financial documents and which ones aren't, and they're exactly they need to be sent. You'll see particular items have a standard required format. That's the roster of volunteer stations. Annual dollar amounts of funding. See, it says use standard required format. If I go to the NOFA page and look at technical assistance information, here I see aggregate dollar amount of funding form. This I would send for the item. And I also see the station roster template, and there are several versions depending on what version of Microsoft Office Excel I'm using. So here I'm using the Office 2010 version of Excel, so I click on this Excel item. Here I would list my stations. As I have seen on the required document list, this is not required for new applicants, only for incumbents. I want to see who you have an MOU with currently. So you have all the information here. And some of these have very handy drop-down boxes. You'll see an arrow next to it, and then a list of every possible option for that particular station type. If you want to list in full, you can click the Station Type Worksheet button at the very bottom, and it has all the volunteer station types that are listed on that drop-down. On this bottom section, you'll see instructions. You can hear in it. It gives you some more information about how to complete this form. For where we go back to the station list, I would find another drop-down for focus areas and objectives. It's blank, but if I scroll to the top, I see FGP first, but then I continue down and I see RSVP. And these are a little bit different from what I would see in grants and on my worksheets because it's focus areas and objectives. So back to my worksheets. See at the top focus area and then the objective for that particular one. So here it says focus area education and objective school readiness. So let's see if I can find the particular for that. So RSVP education school readiness. So I would click that if I had a station that's part of that particular focus area. Back to e-grants and start to complete this. I know that I'm going to send my aggregate dollar amount of funding form, so I mark it as sent. And I mark it as sent means that I'm going to actually send it to that email address or the address with this particular application. My incorporation, well, I'm a current grantee, and I did it with my application last year, so I'm going to mark that as already on file at CNCS. My board of directors, I'm going to mark as sent. CPA certification, I will send. Certain of nonprofit status, maybe I am a not nonprofit and I'm applying, so that's not doesn't apply to me, so I select that one. So you'll continue through here and select as it applies to your particular agency, following the charts listed on pages 18 and 19 of the application instructions. And then click next. Budget. So this project personnel expenses. Click to add a new budget item. Ask to list the title of personnel. So I will say this is the RSVP director. Enter the annual salary. Percent time for this one is 100. Enter the CNCF share. So in this case, I'll say that's 50,000. And my T share is my federal share, essentially. And my excess amount for this will be 0. And I click Save and Close. And this is new. Where a minute ago before I added that budget item. It says Enter Source of Matching Funds. We've had questions about this particular link. Up until this morning, it was not visible for you in eGrants, but it should be there now. So you click Source of Matching Funds, and here is where I would actually say where that $5,000 came from that I listed in the grantee share for the personnel expenses. In this case, it came from my local government. They gave me a grant that I applied for. So I will say Bryan County Government, $5,000 grant. And you continue through all of these. I'm not going to actually open each section because it will ask me to actually enter the information there. It will take a while in this test environment. I don't want to spend time on that. But I'll tell you for each section, so the personnel expenses, you would enter personnel fringe benefits as they apply. Local is for any travel that happens within geographic service area that we had listed at the beginning of the grant. Long distance travel is for anything outside the geographic service area. I would list the purpose of the anticipated long distance travel and the basis for cost calculations. You want to keep in mind cost calculations for every item you're going to enter in your grant budget. For long distance, you'll show the purpose of each trip. You'll break out each of the costs for transportation, meal, lodging, and other travel costs. And just to note, you get detailed budget information starting on page 19 of those eGrants visual instructions that I mentioned at the beginning. The equipment. Here's the cost of equipment for anything more than $5,000. Supplies, anything under $5,000 that you would be using for your program. The quantity of each, the respective costs, and explain how it's going to be used in the project. You would itemize larger items. Control and consultant services is where you list contractor consultants and include a brief justification of the need for each of those. All the services that are documented in a contract, like clerical support, training consultants, equipment repair and maintenance, or bookkeeping if you have a contract for that. Large text boxes that go along with these as you add a budget item or edit a budget item. Be sure to be descriptive on those. Other volunteer support costs, such as criminal history background checks, training evaluation services, or other items. Indirect costs. For any negotiated indirect cost rate agreement that you currently have in place with your cognizant federal agency. And at the bottom you see a subtotal. Now this is a subtotal for just budget section 1. Remember, we have budget sections, section 1 and section 2. We're currently in section 1, and we entered that $20,000 for personnel expenses. So here I see my current share for CNCS is 75%. My non-federal share, or grantee share, is 25%. Now I move on to budget section 2 and enter my source of matching funds. You have a specific source by name. Not anything in that at the moment, because I'm not going to enter anything into this budget section for this session. Did enter something in budget section 2, entered some amount in the grantee share, you'll want to complete that enter source of matching funds section. Even though you already entered some information in section 1, you fill out this box into where you put your grantee share. So if you have grantee share in both section 1 and section 2, you would complete both sources matching funds sections for both Section 1 and Section 2 of the budget. Now I'm going to validate this budget. And I check mark that says I have no errors in my budget, so I close that. See, again, my green checkbox here that I validated. So I'm going to move to the next section, where I funding and demographics. Now I tell where that $5,000 came from that I entered previously, and I get some options for filling it out. For local, that applies to local government, and remember I said I got it from a grant from my county, so I'll enter it there. State applies to state government. Is for non-government funds or in-kind items that are part of your share, and then income is for any program income. I don't have any of that, so I'm going to leave that part blank. Number of unduplicated volunteers should go on to what I entered in the work plan section. We had 100 volunteers, so I'll enter that here. And that section where I can review my entire application that I entered. I can print my report. We are limited to 25 pages for the narratives, executive summary, and face sheet. So here's the face sheet. This included my applicant information, application information, and demographics information I entered in eGrants. And my narratives, remember we didn't quite enter the narratives the way that we were supposed to, so they're pretty short. Now I'm only at 2 pages. I have 23 more pages I could have entered in there. At the end, you see all of your work plans. As Zach pointed out, there are some pieces that were added later, but you can see what as far as your numbers, and you can see the percentage in your primary focus area and number of pieces of information. At the very end, we see the documents, whether or not we intend to send them with this application. So we should view and print report to be sure you're within the page limit. Something else to look at here, subsidiary budget, those don't actually apply. Those are going to be replaced with the options to print either the budget or the budget narrative. So that's a fix that's coming soon. I scroll down, I can see my size, I can see that I validated my budget, and so now I'm going to move to the next screen because everything looks pretty good so far. I'm Authorizing Submit page, and that I am not the authorized representative for my agency. I'm going to log out, but first I'm going to run my application ID that I see over here on the side. So I'll write down that number 13 SR 192986. I log out because I am not the authorized representative, and someone else who is the authorized representative to submit my grant. So in this case, Zach's going to be our authorized representative. He has his own eGrants account, and he's going to log in and show you how to submit.
The authorized representative would log in just as you would, only with his or her own name and password. Click on All. Application ID matches that we want this person to at. I actually logged in with the wrong ID, so it's not showing up. On View All. and I should see S2986. There it is. So I click on Edit. Click Authorizing Submit. Then I check I agree by all of these statements. Then I click Buy this grant application. Tells me verified without errors.
This shows that my application was successfully submitted, and it gives me my date and time it was actually submitted to CNCS.
So the application, and now we're going to open it up for questions. So
To ask a question over the phone lines, please press star then 1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. And we have a few. Our first will be from Paula. Ma'am, your line's open.
Thank you. My question relates to the additional documents that have to be submitted. And I'm looking at the application on page 14. It has a documents list, but it's very different from the documents list that's in grants, and I'm wondering if I'm looking at the correct list or something somewhere else.
What page one again?
I'm on page 14 of the grant application.
Application instructions?
Yes.
You're using the old application instructions? Applications were updated for competition, and the applicant instructions are actually on page 18 and 19. I'll go to it again. So where you find the application instructions, page 18, that's where to start.
I'll be looking at an old one then.
Okay.
So that's my first question. And the second question, well, this probably, it answers it then. You mentioned the financial documents needed to be mailed to another address, but that's obviously on the new application. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ours from Karen. Your line's open.
I have a question about the workflow module. Is there a way to print out that target page?
I'll do a screenshot and it out, but you can't print just the target page by pressing a print button. So to do a screenshot on your keyboard, when you're on that page, you should have a button that says something like print screen. You press the button and you press Control-C, which will copy the screen, and then you can paste it into a Word document and print it that way.
Thank you.
From D, your line is open.
Yes, hi. I have a question on the front page where we have to cut and paste, what state we are and what number, like from Appendix A, Part 1, say, that's where mine is. And it lists all my counties. So look at my executive summary page, and it says list where your workstations are. Do we have to list those counties again in our executive summary? Hello?
Yes, just a moment.
Oh, okay.
Summary, it applies to your primary focus area. So you have to where your stations are for that primary focus area and enter that information.
Okay, so I don't have to enter all of the counties, just the ones in my primary focus area.
Correct.
Okay, that was my first question. And my second question is, performance measures. When I printed those out, the community need section printed at the bottom of the page, and then the verbiage printed out again at the top of the page. Am I doing something wrong, or is that just the way it is?
Shouldn't print that way. So we click on Print PDF. It's up, and then it prints it differently, and it appears on your screen.
Correct. Well, when I hit Print PDF, it actually nothing ever happens. It won't print out anything. But if I scroll down, I can see everything, and I can see everything just printed once. But then go clear to Home, and I do the review, to review everything, and I print it out there. It prints out, view and print. The application, it will print out my narratives and prints out my performance measures. But my primary focus, community need box, only prints once. But the other ones print at the and it's like there's a break, and then the next work plan will print that community need box again, like it's a duplicate almost. I don't know. Is that normal?
It's not normal, but we'll look into it and see if it's what's happening there. So thank you.
It almost looks like I typed that twice, but I did not.
Okay. Well, we will check into it and see what's going on there. Thank you.
Okay. And the last question I have, if we are an incumbent grantee, it's about in the financial portion of your documents that you have to send, the financial documents. If we already have a DUNS number, then we're okay, correct?
If you already have a DUNS number and you have already submitted the documents to us, then yes.
I actually printed out on my face sheet, so that. Well, okay. I think I answered my own question. And also that recipient contact form, what is that?
That a new applicant would send.
Okay, well, that's what I thought. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
And just to clarify quickly on that, the DUNS number is not something that we would issue to you or that you would send to us. It's just something that you're required to have.
Okay, it prints out on that face sheet I noticed, or I put it in there.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you so much.
All right, and now, Jean, your line is open.
I think previously in a call it had been mentioned that if the program director was not 100% of the time spent on the project, then we would reflect that in our budget. But I also wonder, do we have to file a signed waiver request? And if so, what address would that be sent to?
There's actually a section in the narrative where it's to talk about the staff for the project, and that would explain a particular thing.
Okay, but there's a document that has to be...
There's a document that would send you in the narrative.
Okay, we had done that previously.
So you would include your justification.
Okay. And I have a second question. Just to be clear, I think this has been discussed before, but just to be clear, under target in the application instructions, it says that it is the number you anticipate achieving in the performance period, usually 3 years. If your volunteers will serve 200 frail seniors over the course of that performance period, you would 200. But I think this has been discussed, and I think the target is supposed to be what you would achieve in the 12-month period of your third year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So all targets are annual, and what you are putting there is what you expect to achieve in the third year.
That's the way I understood it, but I just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Request, Britta, your line is open, ma'am.
Hi there. For incumbents completing a station roster, you probably know the format is different, and if we are submitting this as a snapshot of where our program is at the time we submit the grant application, we've been working with service categories, now being asked to transfer that information into focus area and objectives, including some of the stations that we plan to graduate are going to be in those new categories. How do we deal with that?
As you mentioned in your question, the station roster is a snapshot of your project as it currently is.
Right.
So you would submit the station roster according to those stations that you have current MOUs with, and then later in this process, if a winning applicant, you would send an updated roster to your state office when that time came.
But how do we translate? Right now, the station roster and the stations are reporting service categories. You are asking in this roster to report focus areas and objectives. Are you saying that those fields do not need to be completed?
There's an option for other community priorities, and that's what we're checking to see if we include that on the station roster.
Okay.
If it's not an option, then just choose the best fit, the one's closest.
I mean, we're not doing. What I'm trying to ask you. I mean, we these stations are not. A lot of them are antiquated. They're not based on objectives or any of those things. So how to deal with that?
Then we just check other community priorities is an option, so you would select the other community priorities.
Okay, wonderful. So anything that falls into that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next request, Nan Hart, your line is open.
I have a couple questions. First, just to clarify, and I know this has come up already, but I'm just not quite getting it. In the document checklist, if you're filing for a new 3-year grant, which a lot of people going through recompetition, I'm assuming that's what we're all doing, the areas that say yes, I'm a little confused because I thought there were a couple where you said you only have to do it if it's changed if you're a previous grantee. So clarify that? Does it mean if you're a previous grantee, whether it's a new 3-year grant or not, you don't have to submit those? Or everybody that's getting a new 3-year grant has to submit all those?
The ones that are marked for only have changed. It's only the column for those who have received a CNCS grant. So it's incumbents, it's people who have a current CNCS grant, maybe in an FGP or SDP program, and it's only have changed. So board of directors, community advisory group, organizational chart, and project director job description. You can see here. So if you submitted the project director job description last year with your application, you would have submitted it to your state office. If you submitted it last year and there's been a change since then, maybe you added something to the job description, then you resubmit it with this application. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. So irregardless of whether it's a new grant or not, if you're a previous senior corps grantee, there are documents you don't have to submit. Is that correct?
So let's say you're an FGP and you're applying for RSVP. You probably don't have an RSVP job description that you sent last year because you didn't have an RSVP last year. So then it's changed, so you send that regular job description with the application.
Right. I'm talking about if you're current RSVP, but during this new recompetition and new grant, that category that says new doesn't necessarily apply to you. That only means new if you were not a previous grantee. Okay, that's what I needed to get clear. Which is also on this page. When you talk about the annual assessment, are there guidelines as to what that annual assessment should be, what's being looked for? Are there any guidelines around that? I've always found that very confusing.
Annual assessment isn't required as a document to be submitted until continuation time.
What are you looking for in an annual assessment?
So only answering questions about the renewal aspect of the grant process today. We are talking about renewal competition, not continuation today.
I hope at point there'll be some clarity about that one. Last question I have is about the tools that are offered in the performance measure section. If you choose to use a tool that is not necessarily a tool that's listed there, and it's for an explanation of that, what information are you looking for? Does it have to measure the same things as a tool that we would have used that's suggested by CNCS, or do a tool that maybe measures it in a different way? What are the guidelines around the tools?
It has to measure the same thing because the wording of the output or outcome, whichever it applies to, can be changed. So the answer is yes, it does have to measure the same thing. And as long as it's in line with all of the information in the performance measure instructions, which you can find in Appendix B, then would be used.
I said in particular around education ones that offer, suggest pre and post testing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, in some measures you'll find an other, and what you would select and then describe what your method would be. There are very specific guidelines in Appendix B for the education measures.
Okay, thank you.
Question twice. Your line is open. Please button, your line is open. Diane, your line is open.
Yes, I have a question on the work plans. When Zach was talking about the disaster, and I don't understand, or how you said there were no outcomes listed or objectives. How do you click it if you want objectives there? Outcomes.
No outcomes available there. So you would find your outcomes in other areas. Now, that's not saying that we don't want you to measure outcomes. We're not requiring you to report them if you choose those measures.
Wow. So okay, I'm just real confused on that part. We have some disaster that we do outcomes on, but you know them, so I have to figure someplace else to do my outcomes?
The first part of your question, we don't want to know them. We do want to know them, but we're not requiring outcomes for that area because we don't have any agency-wide outcomes for disaster. So the second part, yes, unfortunately, you would have to find outcomes to report in other focus areas.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Line is open now.
Hi, I have a couple of questions regarding the station roster. What exactly are you asking for with unduplicated volunteers?
So the same that we're asking for in the performance measure module, which is that for the purpose of unduplicated volunteers, each volunteer can only appear in one place.
On reports, then, it will show up that a lot of them will be 0. All right, just wanted to double check on that. And what do you mean with your question on veterans, yes or no? Yes or no for what?
Is this on the station roster also?
Yes.
Oh, there is. Does that station serve veterans?
Oh, does that count as active military? Does that count as active military as well?
Yes.
So veterans and military, the same individuals that can be served with those performance measures.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question from Lisa Valentine. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm really confused about the station roster, and I apologize, but we're grading a lot of volunteers on 12/31, and the plan to do that was so that we would have the 3 months period to re-engage them to get ready for this new grant. Do all of those volunteers, even the ones we know are not going to be carried over into the new grant? I mean, I already got my station roster done, and I did it wrong.
So this is application starting from
July. Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, you wouldn't have to include those.
So I can't. Okay, so I go ahead and just take the people, put the people that we're going to be that are going to be with us in that new grant. Okay, very good. And then the question I have is, I don't know, we have a 5% fundraising waiver that I can do the grant, do the first year grant for that. I mean, I had to do the hours for that. I've already spent 15 hours on this grant, and I don't even have it entered yet.
Where you put it
No.
in the excess.
Oh, I understand that. I'm asking you how we record it.
Okay, so that's really a grant management issue, which we're not able to address on this call.
Okay, I think you. Okay.
So it really sounds like what you're asking about have to do with time sheets and how you track the time and record, and that's not something.
No, that's my question. What the Paperwork Reduction Act was, they said, okay, here's this grant, and it takes, I don't know what the number is, 4 hours to do this grant. Because all of the transition and the training, and we count whatever that number is in the Paperwork Reduction Act, or do we need to count every hour that we've worked on this thing, doing these hour-long conference calls and things like that? That's my question.
I'm sorry, I really think you're talking about the management of the grant, and this is really addressing the application part of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Right now from Jamie, your line is open.
Yes, thank you. So I thought I heard something yesterday, could have been mistaken, and it went by relatively quickly. Has the executive summary been redone, and if it has, where do you find it?
Yeah, it has, and it's been posted the site.
Okay.
NOFA page. I'm having a little trouble getting there right now.
Okay. As long as I know, because you did it, but you went really fast yesterday when you said it and wasn't taking notes at that time. I have another question. Just if you want me to wait.
And I'll have somebody else try to run the computer.
Thank you much. I also asked a question about admin cost and things in yesterday, and you said do a negotiated indirect cost agreement. Now, if I had done one of those before, it looks like that's a document that needs approval and there's time involved, and do you still have time to use that agreement on this grant if you if you do not have one in place or you haven't got one yet?
So if you have a current negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, you can do it line item by line item in the budget.
Well, do it that way. Wouldn't those employees be required to submit timesheets and then be background checked and all that? I mean, do I have an option at this point? Can I do the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement?
Hold a second.
Thanks. Sorry.
So we think we know the answer to that, but we're going to double check and address it in FAQ.
Oh, really appreciate that. Will that be answered tomorrow?
I promise that it will be done by tomorrow.
Any questions that are coming up on the call today will be posted on Tuesday.
Tuesday? Oh, okay. I'm concerned because of just seen on that A form Is there anybody in the financial department that can help me?
Well, I can say that the likely answer is yes. If they appear on the budget, then you have to have timesheets and you have to have a background check for those.
Yeah, I know that part, but my question is, do you have time? And I'm wondering, because I didn't want to disqualify this grant, if I were to put that cost rate agreement in there, and obviously we have until March to get full signed and documents and things like that. Just legalities, that's what I'm wondering.
We'll ask that in the FAQ on Tuesday.
All right, I'm sorry it takes so much time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Karen Matthews, your line is open.
We were having a rough time here today. Just two quick questions. The ID number was not included in our initial financial packet that we sent out because we sent it out probably when we first got the grant, very shortly after that. Will they be able to track it based upon the name and the affiliate on the grant?
Hold on just a second. Let me make sure I'm getting you under. Talking about the application ID?
Yes, the application ID. I hadn't started it yet because the eGrants wasn't open at the time, but they already had sent the fiscal information out prior to that.
Okay, so they sent the financial information, but there's no app ID on it because you didn't have an app ID at the time.
That's right. It wasn't open. It was supposed to be open, and it was opened at least a week after that.
Okay. So we'll be able to match it up.
Okay, that's good. Excellent. Second thing was to backtrack around the background checks. If we are current employees who've been working under an existing grant through RSVPs, would we still have to have a background check if we got a new grant under this region?
Is it the same sponsor?
Same everything. Same employees.
Same sponsor, same employees. The position hasn't changed, then no. You would need a new background check.
Most excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
Our next is from Lori. Your line is open.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I
Yes.
have a quick question about the station roster. I have a couple of different answers, and I thought I had the answer, and I have to ask again. Do you want the station roster that I have now or my proposed station roster? Because the purpose of it is to show who we have MOUs with now, correct?
And that when we said no, you don't have. If you have stations that you know you are discontinuing,
yes, I do.
That you're certain that you're not going to have, we're saying then no, there's not really any reason to include those.
Oh, because I was having difficulty with the focus area and objectives drop downs because I couldn't categorize them, and because they had nothing to do with the focus areas presently. So in grabbing some of my stations and right sizing, I couldn't put them in a focus area. That answers my question. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
Nurse, your line's open.
Good afternoon. I just have a quick question. Most of them were answered on the station roster, and I want to talk to the PDF thing on the view application print. It does go to PDF that way, and it prints exactly like it shows up in the PDF.
Thank you.
And I just have one other question. On page 10 of the NOFO, it talks about a draft RSV application or a development checklist. Is that posting where?
So, on page 10,
it says please visit the website, and it says application development checklist. To what are y'all talking there?
we're going to try and locate it.
Okay.
On this page, the technical assistance information, it's this list.
Okay. I'm sorry. One other question. You know, the unduplicated volunteers on that station roster, RSVP report, none of the, what we have, as I am, I cannot figure out a way to work that. It's very intense to count unduplicated volunteers, and if somebody has figured out a way to do it through a system, it sure would be helpful.
I assume that was kind of a question for your colleagues on the call, since volunteer reporters.
If they have it, they could put an FAQ. That would be helpful.
It's something that we would address.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Deanna, your line's open.
A question that I think's been asked before, but I need clarification on it. On the Q&A, question 82, dated 9/28, answers that percentages can be used. It's when you do surveys. However, in phone calls, we've been told that whole numbers should be used and not percentages. This is not a true reflection, as we can't force anybody to complete a survey, and only a small percentage will do that. What really is reflective is the outcome percentage would be, but I need to clarify what it is you want for sure.
Yes, and that's actually a typo in the document. If you just simply take away the percent sign after the 50, we want the actual number. We realize that, so 100 surveys, and I think what you're saying is, I'm not getting 100 surveys back. If 50 individuals report that they show improvement, the percentage would actually more accurately reflect that. The answer is, we realize that that is an issue, but we want you to report the actual number of individuals and not the percentage.
Like some we have like 500, and we may not, if we sent surveys to all 500, we might not get back but 100 of those.
Correct. We realize that's just the nature of doing a survey.
Okay.
So I want you to
Did we
actual
ever
number.
executive summary final information?
I'm saying again?
Did we ever find the executive summary final information that we've been waiting for?
It's on the screen right now. Grant instruction page.
Okay, that's been there all the time, so it hasn't been updated, or it's not going to be updated?
What you're seeing is what is updated now. It was updated today, and we're actually pulling it from the website, and that's what you see on your screen. So updated. What you're seeing is what is on our website. It's an updated version, updated as of today.
Tell me what changed from the original?
It's a year issue. The issue was clarification on what your targets were for the executive summary, and this version talks about that you're thinking about what you plan to achieve at the end of the third year of the grant.
And not the 12 months. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, now, Kathleen, your line is open.
I just wanted to preface this by saying I apologize if you received this question before I logged on a little bit late after the Q&A already started. But my question is for the station roster, your total number of unduplicated volunteers and your total number of contributing volunteers equal the numbers that are in your performance measures and your work plans, the total unduplicated count and the total contributing count?
They may not. If you're in the station rosters, you're representing the total current number. Know that you may be making changes, but don't know exactly where those changes will happen yet. They may not be the same.
Okay, thank you.
Our request now from Joni. Your line is open, ma'am.
Yeah, I was wondering, on the Appendix A, it's how many volunteers we are supposed to have. Do we list that in that calculator, or do we do a percentage of that?
That number, the number of volunteers that you plan to have end of year 3.
Yeah.
And OPA stipulates that must be no less than 80% of the number that's listed in Appendix A.
Okay. You just to list just the 80%. You want us to list the 100% of it.
With the number that you plan to have, which
Okay.
must be at least 80%.
Okay. And also, we have been dealing with one of our counties, working to drop them, but because it's in the NOFO, do I have to serve the county next year?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Peter, could you tell us how many questions are in queue?
We have 4 more.
Okay, those 4, and we go.
Debbie, line is open now.
We're talking about the number of volunteers just now. Is the same thing apply for the target? I think I heard you say that it's not cumulative, it's just the total at end of year 3. Kind of both things over the various calls on target.
So it is a little bit confusing. Let me try. The answer is that for targets, you enter the number that you expect to have in year 3. So they're not cumulative, they're annual numbers. But for example, if I'm using output measure H8, and I say in the year 3 of my grant, I plan to have 100 unduplicated volunteers serving in that particular work plan with that output, I would enter 100. And so when it comes time for reporting, year 1, I have 60, I would report 60 actual volunteers serving, and then hopefully in year 2, I would see something more like 80, 85, and by year 3, I would have 100. So in the targets, you expect the number that you plan to have by the 3rd year.
So the output targets are volunteers. It's not number of disaster kits.
I'm talking about in the number of unduplicated volunteers column. The same rule applies for the output target. So the annual number that you plan to achieve in the 3rd year.
And they have to be people. If it's capacity building, it could be dollars.
Depends on the measure. So, for example, with D6, it would actually be service hours. For EN4, it would actually be acres. If it's a H8, it would be people.
Okay, great. Another question, when you ask about veterans on the roster, certain veterans, is that the aid organization where the volunteer is placed is serving veterans, or the volunteer's role is to serve veterans in their volunteer capacity?
Yeah, volunteer's role is to serve veterans.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, your line is open now.
Hello. I have a few questions. On the executive summary, I just wanted to clarify, when we're putting in fill in the number for the volunteers we have, and then also fill in the service activities for the volunteers we have, is that program-wide, or are we gearing that to our primary focus area?
It's the primary focus area.
So anything that we're putting in, any of these fill-in the blank types, are just primary focus area information?
I'm not sure when you're talking about fill in the blank, but in the executive summary,
yes,
it's strict primary focus area. If you're talking about the work plan section,
talking about the executive summary and the paragraph that we have.
Okay, and the fill in the number, then yes, you're talking about the primary focus area. I was confused about your question.
For example, if we have a total of 320 volunteers, but we have 120 of them, or 125 doing the primary focus, that fill in the number for the volunteers would be 125?
That's correct.
Okay. Also, the service activity, the other day it was brought up on exactly what we're putting in the drop-down box, or the box for that, and there was a place for information where we could go find that. Mm-hmm. Could you to me again?
So there are actually 2 places.
Okay.
You'll find them in the performance measures worksheets, and you will find it in Appendix B, which are performance measures instructions. And if you're looking at Appendix B, it will start on page 4, and that will give you a list of all of the outputs, service activities, outcomes, along with the objectives. And that's what we're looking at right now is Appendix B. Service activities column.
Is that exactly what we're putting into the text box or the station that we're listing, the blank box or the field where we're adding information?
In the field in the executive summary?
Yes, it's something that you're explaining the description, or the description, or as you down where you see the activities, and then you have the blank field information.
So,
where are you finding what you're asking for there?
So, in executive summary, you can simply put the service activities as they appear in Appendix B. That's your question. Are you asking, do you enter the service activity, or do you enter the description that you enter?
No, I'm understanding that. I'm going back into the work plan itself.
Okay.
The service activity drop-down, where you're actually selecting the service activity. There's a box where you need to fill in that information, and I'm asking, what information are you looking to be in that service activities field?
Oh, okay. So you check the service activity, and then for the description, you would enter how. And if you look in your FAQs, there is a FAQ that addresses this.
The number?
Yes, I am looking for it right now. Hold a second.
And right now on the screen, what we've done is we've put up the FAQs, and you can either do Control F or go to Toolbars, and then go to Edit and do Find. And then the Find section will show up on the right upper hand corner of your FAQ page, and then you can put a query in there. So you should actually query the service activities there. You just scroll down until you found the right one.
Okay.
And then, so we're going to actually scroll right now and try to find your answer.
Thank you. One more question. I'm not being able to print out my budget narrative or my budget report. Also, put in information into the, I think of what it's called, the volunteer expense. I put in a service call, but I have not received anything back on that. And I haven't seen anything that's been fixed. Is it going to be available, or do I follow on that again?
So that's a fix that's currently underway.
Yeah,
okay.
Somehow they stuck subsidiary budgets options in there, which is something that Senior Corps has never used, and should be a budget and a budget narrative being released in there soon.
Okay.
And then if you go to your screen right now, you'll see that just through scrolling through service activity search, we found question FAQ number 72 and answer.
Much. That's it.
This request now is from Marlene. Your line is open, ma'am.
Just to clarify, the things were updated last night. When getting a little nervous over when is the most recent edition happening on all the things that are online that we're accessing, because I'm working from things that I print out so I can carry them around and work on them. and I printed things out last night, and I'm hoping that they haven't been changed earlier today. When you do change things, do you write, do you net that times have changed? I can see that.
Hi, yes, when things are updated, there should be like a little dash and then the date that they were updated next to them. The FAQs are the one thing that will be changing at this point now, I would say daily. Today, there is going to be a new set of FAQs. Due to the holiday weekend, there will not be FAQs on Friday as usual, but starting next week, we will have daily updates to the FAQs. So at the end of each day, going forward until through the 16th of October, there will be daily updates of the FAQs.
Okay, so I can assume then that there won't be any other changes to the application itself, the application instructions?
No. The application instructions were clarified so that folks better understood that the executive summary was a 3-year description, not 1 year, not 12 months.
Executive summary is a description of what happens in the 3rd year of the 3-year grant.
Correct.
Okay, and does it, forgive me, it is only volunteers in the primary focus areas?
Correct.
When you're listing an estimated number of RSVP volunteers will serve, you are only quoting the number of RSVP volunteers in the primary focus area and not the rest of your volunteers?
Only executive summary, correct.
Only primary focus area. Okay.
That's for the executive summary.
Executive summary, yeah.
Okay, because like if I have 160 volunteers in the entire program, but I have 30 of them or 50 of them in my primary focus area, then I only write down I have 50 RSVP volunteers serving.
But in the then you clarify, finishing that sentence in my primary focus area.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just make sure that I those details in there.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. You've been helpful.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Question from Britta. Your line is open.
Hi, for taking the second call. Just know you posted instructions for the roster that we were discussing earlier, and they are counter to what your last advice was, and so I'm wondering if you are going to post the recommendation that if we have stations we know we are definitely graduating, that we should not include them on the roster.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. You have an update. The FAQs are updated 10-4. The instructions with regard to rosters state that we should include only those volunteer stations with which we currently have an MOU. In the process, we'll be asked to update it. But what was told to a caller was that if we have stations we know we are going to be graduating, we do not need to include them on the roster. So what I'm asking is basically which is correct and which one should we follow. That the caller was just the procedure caller was just told to follow, or the one that is posted on the update with today's date.
All correct. If you know you will not, if you have a set of volunteers with whom you have an MOU that you know at the start of your grant will no longer be in existence, you need to include them on the volunteer station roster.
Would someone be kind enough to post that response on the FAQ?
Certainly. That'll go up when we post on Tuesday's FAQ. That
sounds great. Yep. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Karen, your line is open.
Okay, last question.
Question's already been answered. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. Actually, we have a little set of questions that we're going to answer right now that came in online, and then we're going to close out today's call.
So the first question we'll address is, can the work plans resulting in outcomes change from year to year as long as the percentage of volunteers is 10%? The answer is yes, so that's not the best practice, but if necessary, then yes, you are allowed to do that. Next question is, if I am using 3 different measures for the futures focus area, do I need 3 community needs statements? And the answer is yes, most likely you do need 3 community needs statements if you're using 3 separate output measures. And there were questions about the subsidiary budget not computing properly. I think we've already addressed that. I think that's it.
Great. We just have one little announcement that we want to make sure folks, 2 announcements that make sure folks are aware of. Just to reiterate that the FAQs that were updated today, so usually we update them on Fridays, but because of holiday week, we're updating them today. So there will be no new FAQs tomorrow. Next news of FAQs will go up on Tuesday and thereafter. I also do want to clarify, as much as we love individual staff who, including Zach and Patty, who have been fabulously assisting with these technical assistance calls, they are not your first line of communication for asking questions. We have 2 vehicles through which you are to submit questions about the competition. One is 2013 RSVP at cns.gov, that email address. It's a general email box that you can submit your questions to, and will be answer the FAQs. Another a place to send questions is the National Help Desk, and questions of technical nature or issues that you're having, submit anything in the e-grant system, please send your questions there. We will be sending back to folks who submitted questions to individual staff. Will be sending them back to you to ask you to resubmit them through the vehicles that we've made available for asking questions. And that's send your questions to the National Help Desk or 2013 RSVP at cns.gov. We're excited that all of you could join us today. Please share that next week, Wednesday and Thursday, we will be having webinars. Will be available to answer your questions. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we'll be back with you. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you. Today's call has concluded. Thank you for participating. Please disconnect your phone line at this time.